as we officially start our program for today. By way of introduction, I am Siyabonga Maphumulo, the Acting Senior Manager for Corporate Stakeholder Management at uMngeni-uThukela Water. Firstly, maybe let me thank you for all presenting yourselves today. We have a full house, which is always a welcome development. We are here today to present to you what is Mhlathuze Water's annual financial performance for the year that was in the 22-23 financial year. But I just need to clarify before we proceed, because we are now uMngeni-uThukela Water, particularly for the members of the media in our midst, that in as so much you might see us referring interchangeably to uMngeni-uThukela Water as well as Mhlathuze Water. We are not reneging on the reconfigured institution. It is still uMngeni-uThukela. It's just that we need to report on the financial activities and activities overall operationally of Mhlathuze Water, because the reconfiguration happened after the activities of the year had ended. So that is in essence what we are here for, and just to also thank once again all of you for presenting yourselves. Can I, without wasting time, welcome the board chairperson to give us his speech as well as the message on behalf of the board. Advocate Vusikuzwayo, if you could come over, please. Thank you.
Morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. I think the first thing I just need to do is that let me invite the board members so that you can see who the board members are. So I'll just call their names. They will rise and look your direction, not my direction. I know them. So that everybody can really put a face when we talk about this uMngeni-uThukela Water Board. So Ms. Mhlathuze Nolthando, Deputy Chair, can rise. I wanted to do the ladies first, but Kaisan Shandu is there. You may rise, Mr. Shande. Then we have Miss uMngeni-uThukela, Senamile Masango, Diane Hotzuk. Then men can come. That's Advocate Lavand Kapal, Mr. Utim Cornish. I think about 4 members who are not with us today. There is Miss Uthandazile Mhlongo. I think she got a breakdown just near Palito. She will be joining us very soon. We also have Mr. Usibusiso Mkhize. He's not with us today. I think he tendered an apology. Also, we don't have Sipho Mtolo, as well as Advocate uMshengu. Those last 2 are actually attending a water meeting which is convened by the Minister of the Department of Water and Sanitation, who is our shareholder. So they are representing the board at Gwaklimba, which is Ward 1 eThekwini. So that is the complement of the board that we have with you. So everything that I say doesn't come from me, it comes from us. Thanks. The other thing which I think I must forthright do, I think one must apologize. This is what happened. I think this gathering ought to have been on the 19th of January this year. It was rescheduled, not because it was not important, but what the minister had done in October 2023, he released AMA results of blue drop, green drop, and so because of that, it then became some alarming that certain of the water services authorities were probably lying more on the ICU in relation to the quality of water therefore he convened a water summit, which was on 18 and 19 January this year. Hence, we had to postpone this gathering. So it wasn't done because it lacked, I think, relevance, or it ranked too low in the ladder of importance. It's because of the circumstances, I think, that were beyond us. And there are obviously good news that were derived out of that water summit, which some of those news would be shared, I think, at an appropriate stage within the province, because this port serves the entire province. So the region we are in also has benefits that would be derived from the resolutions of the water summit. But because the report of that summit hasn't been shared with us, so we are tight-lipped, but we can indicate that there will be good results, good news that will be shared with the appropriate communities. Thanks. As one says, today is a singular honor, I think, to be standing in front of you. We from uMngeni-uThukela, as you all know, we one entity, as Mr. Mapumulo was indicating, but today is a day dedicated just to present the annual report for 2022-2023 for Mhlathuze water board as it then was. So it's in that context that we are here. So I think the other added benefit probably is that post-measure, so the entity we now talk about, which is uThukela, uMngeni-uThukela, incorporating the region which was serviced by Mhlathuze, is actually giving a better shape in the context that will be better understood when the acting CE Mr. Mkhwanazi. Maybe let me also indicate, I think, where we are in relation to how the presentation is going to be done, because what actually developed is that we have an acting chief executive, Dr. Manana, but Dr. Manana, I think very early he indicated to me that he needed a 2 weeks leave, which leave was then granted. So he's away on his 2 weeks leave, and then Mr. Mkhwanazi then he was appointed by Dr. Manana to act as UCE. So when Mr. Mkhwanazi stands here, he stands as the acting chief executive, and he actually is the CFO of the entity. So he's wearing that cap, that he is the chief financial officer. But just to complete the narrative, the board is actually on its last mile in the process of appointing a chief executive officer. So when we came in, ordinarily we had a scenario where we find ourselves with too many actors. So very soon, I think that acting episode is going to be closed. We're going to have a permanent chief executive officer for the new entity. So that route is actually taking its course. I felt that I needed to indicate so that when you see Mr. Mkhwanazi rising in the position he now is, we all have that background in mind. And fortunately for me, as you all know, I'm a lawyer, so I know nothing about money. So Mr. Mkhwanazi is more equipped to unpack those aspects. But I think as a chairperson of the board, as we all would know, the the board has certain pillars. So one of its strength actually is that the governance of the entity, which I think I will talk to I think at a later stage of my presentation. But for today's proceedings, I think one actually seeks to then say this region is, in my view, in good hands, in the sense that when it was brought into one entity which now covers the whole province, there are skills that you wouldn't have found them other than in this region of the province. We all know what kind of services and what kind of clientele base the region actually services. I mean, if anyone drives through, not even coming to Richards Bay, you'll always see more trucks than you'll see anywhere in the province. So it means there is a hub that is being hosted in this area. Where there is a hub, it means that there is a high industrialization, and what it means there's activity there. And in every activity in any industry, we all know that water is an element, if it's not a core of any of those businesses. Therefore, my statement to everybody today is that it is not by coincidence. I think it's God's design that the merger has been finalized, that the region has its kind of present clientele which are more important to the business of the board. The CFO in his cap would in my view would not have failed if he did not tell you in terms of the percentage of growth that this region has brought into the business. When you think of Mhlathuze Water Board as an entity that you would think it no longer exists, but we all know that when there is a merger, it means two equal parties or partners are coming together, or one of the other party, because you also look at the size and the slice of a cake that needed to be cut. But every cake is put together by the ingredients. So what we do have now as uMngeni-uThukela Water Board is an entity that, in my view, has all the ingredients that are required to ensure that there is quality water, there is a constant water supply, and that the board ensures that those services that are being rendered, I think, are paid for, so that when complaints do come about quality of water and issues of non-supply, then the board has to know its accountability time, because you can't be taking money when actually your product is not up to scratch. So we normally don't make those statements, but because we take pride in that we found Mhlathuze region as a going concern. It's a viable part of the business. Sometimes you'll take a business which really is just loaded with liabilities. They aren't liabilities. The one that is not a liability, which was a loan, I think I'm told by next year it will be fully paid, Mr. Mkhwanazi. So that's how the confidence I think we have in that we here having merged and knowingly that we are not here standing in front of you with a jaundiced eye to say this entity actually is a liability. We would be foolish, we would be misleading if we were, for whatever reason, have such inclination. So that's the kind of a business that was. You would always know that when a business is taken over, which actually we have now, because uMngeni-uThukela is now a new entity. There are upgrades which have been budgeted for. I would just give you I think the heads up. There is an upgrade for Insezi water treatment plant, which I think Mr. Mkhwanazi, I would prefer him to talk in detail into what is contained in there. I don't want to shoot, I think, with blanks. There is the Richards Bay Development Zone Phase 1F water supply and influent disposal for Nyaza Metals. We all know what that investment has brought into the region, and in this regard, as a board, we must complement by ensuring that our services, water services, and the influence are actually up to scratch, so that there is more investment that comes this side of the region. The desalination really of seawater, as I was saying, there is value that Mhlathuze water has brought into the business. Desalination, the former uMngeni never had an opportunity on desalination, but this side of the province, they already exist. They already exist. I think it's a project on desalination, and again, desalination would enable us, I think, as residents of the country, to benefit from the water that we see really at our shores. What, in my view, it would do, it would add to the stock of water that eventually the region would have. I don't want to say that there are no water issues this side of the region. We've been to the Tuba direction on water, been to Mkanyagute, but there are projects that the staff from this region are actually implementing. Therefore, one would really take pride and say the skill that deals with desalination is a scarce skill that would not have come into our fold if it wasn't for the foresight of bringing the likes together and then give, I think, the much needed, I think, financial power and the financial benefit, as well as the water service that would be the output thereof. In terms of financial performance, I think one can indicate that as of the end of the financial year 2022-23, Mhlathuze Water had realized a surplus of 173.5 million. Hence, I was saying it wasn't a liability. There is value brought in by Mhlathuze Water. Hence, the commitment from the board to invest where it has to invest to ensure that we commensurate with the investments as well as the returns, because at the end of the day, we ought to run a viable water board for the benefit of other services which the board is actually responsible for. As I indicated, I think one pillar really of any organization is the governance. As one was introducing and priming everyone about Mr. Mkhwanazi, I think as a board, we constituted in the form we are. We have structured ourselves. We have committees, and we have all those committees, in my view, that are very relevant to ensure that the appropriate oversight is actually alive and is headed by men and women who with the correct skills. As everybody would always frown, what criteria is used to appoint a person into a board? The answer won't come from me, because I also was appointed by the minister into the board. But what I can tell you, when board members as a collective, they ought to ensure that they support a shareholder. I will be lying if I say a board must first give support to management. The board must support a shareholder, because that's where the funds really come from. But on the other hand, management is supported by the board through accountability. So the board puts management into its paces through accountability. And in the form of accountability, as the board is constituted by men and women with different diverse skills, so the management then gets support from those board members who are skilled in those respective areas. That's how then the support that management really is acquired. Why so? Because board members aren't in an organization a threat to management. I always say that. Board members, they come in, and fortunately with us, for instance, we've got 4 years. But somebody who's in management, others are on permanent positions, others are on contract. And those contracts, some they precede the term of the current board. That is why I always say there should never be a perceived competition between an executive member and a board member. It's a line that might look murky, but in reality, as board members, you come in, you must ensure that you play your role so that the executive remains on his or her toes to ensure that your policies, your plans that you have approved. And by the way, they are the ones who craft the policies. They are the ones who put together the plans. For us as a board, it's just to quiz these plans, to quiz these policies, and support them. Hence, we take resolution and note what has been crafted by an executive member of management. And there is no doubt that the roles are clear. Consequently, one then always say, where in doubt with any role, it perhaps it's better to approach, we always say a chairperson. It's like in school, you will approach a school principal. So approach a chairperson to raise whatever that you have. So we are that kind of a board. We have that kind of an executive management, although there has been quite a number of acting positions. As of the 31st of January, the board has actually approved a macro structure. So the macro structure has been approved by the board. Therefore, management now need to implement the macro structure, and then they will then be developing a microstructure. The microstructure is the responsibility of management. The macrostructure is the responsibility of the board. We are not saying by merely approving it, we've ticked a box. No, we haven't ticked a box, because they've got, you know, when you merge two entities, you'll sometimes find one or two individuals doing the same job or having been appointed for the same position. Therefore, we are in the process of finding appropriate policies which will ensure that we fill in the positions at the appropriate level, and whatever becomes the bottom line in filling the positions, we are guided properly by policy as to how we deal with that. Everyone would know that during the merger there was a moratorium. So one other reason also of there being vacancies was a moratorium. Therefore, when this board really was appointed, it had to then address appropriate submissions to the minister in order to uplift the moratorium. Because once the moratorium is uplifted, a number of these acting stints will disappear, because people will then have to be interviewed for those positions where the vacancies requires interview. So, in a nutshell, that's the kind of governance approach that this board is really driving towards too. It's a board that is very much alive in that there are challenges ahead. When you deal with human resources, you're not dealing with pawns which you can just push and move. We're dealing with people who have rights. We're dealing with people who belong to families. Some are husbands, some are wives. Therefore, our approach has to be a human approach. We are not moving pawns. We'll be dealing with human beings. Hence, we're looking for a proper policy that will guide us. There will be bottlenecks. There will be issues. We will be challenged. But the approach we're adopting is the one that ought to acquit us that they were following a particular rule. We are a board that believes in clear policy, a clear rule. Everybody must know the policy, must know the rule that he or she really must follow. There is no magic in that. It's openness, it's communication. Thank everyone for coming to be with us today.
Thank you very much, Poche, for those insightful words. When you started your remarks today, you alluded to the fact that some board members, at least two of them, were taken away on a ministerial event. It took me back to something very poignant that you mentioned to the Chief of Staff in planning for today's event, where really the minister had an expectation that the chairperson might be part of those proceedings. But you insisted that due to the strategic nature of this event and the stakeholders that we have in our midst, you would tender an apology to the minister because you absolutely had to be here. So I think that was a leadership gesture from you, Chairperson, and which also took very much seriously the message that had to be delivered to stakeholders today, and we thank you very much for that. Can I now call upon Mr. Tami Mkhwanazi, who wears 3 hats today? One of CFO, which is habitual hat that he normally dons on a normal day. One of acting chief executive. And lastly, one that was just bequeathed on him of chief operations officer, acting by virtue of the operations executive being away on the ministerial engagement that Chair alluded to. Mr. Mkhwanazi, please. Thank you.
morning, everyone. Probably special recognition to the chairperson of the board and the board members, the colleagues, management from uMngeni-uThukela, employees, as well as all our esteemed guests. I think everyone is welcome. As you have heard from the chairperson and program director, on a lighter note, I am your everything today. But as a start, I think at a high level, we're here to present Mhlathuze Water's 2022-2023 annual report around the background of the minister actually having gazetted a reconfiguration and a combination of two organizations. So you can then understand that if the minister gazetted in November, you know, there would be those uncertainties which will cause some operations to be interrupted. And in the backdrop of that difficulty of the unknowns, as well as the whole process of the reconfiguration, I'm very comfortable to then present these results, as I consider very positive results under the circumstances. Just starting on performance over the years, you will notice that of the targets that were set for the 2022-2023 financial year, Mhlathuze Water achieved 71%. In the previous financial year, they had achieved 67%. So there was an improvement. But as I said, keep in mind that it's an organization that was going through a reconfiguration. And with the reconfiguration, we did have a moratorium on employment of staff. So obviously you would then have those challenges of areas where we could not actually place employees. We got 71%, which means there was a differential of about 29%. What really caused the 29%? From an executive side of things, it was one, the compliance requirements of the 21-22 annual reports, which the compliance was zero. I think we were 2 days late. There was a target of an unqualified external audit report for the 21-22 financial year, which we actually received a qualification in the 21-22 financial year. There was a requirement of 0 breaches of materiality and significant frameworks, but the actual was 7 breaches. We had a target of 0 unresolved internal audit findings, but we found ourselves with 4 that were actually unresolved for the year. The repeat internal audit findings were supposed to be 0. There were about 6 actual. 80% of the shareholder compact targets were supposed to be achieved. I think we ended up achieving 68.5%. And then there was 100% implementation of strategic risk further action plans, and the actual was 87.5. Under corporate services, you had 30% staff remuneration of total operating expenditure. We actually ended up with about 30.84, so we nearly met that one, slightly. 95% ERP user requirements implemented, and ERP was not implemented. But as I said again, let's just keep in mind that some of these were not achieved because we're already going through a reconfiguration, which practically meant that you can't be spending on capex, and obviously you can't be placing staff. There was a target of 95% compliance with facility management standards. The actual was 94.45%, and that was not achieved. And then there was 95% implementation of knowledge and information management, and obviously the actual was 0. Operations, 4% avoidable water losses on water abstracted. The actual was actually 2%, and 3.5% repairs and maintenance of PPE. The actual ended up at about 3.11. Under scientific services, 100% quality compliance with CWDP. The actual was 89.7%, 5% growth in laboratory revenue, a real growth excluding annual price increases. The actual was a reduction of about 19.66%. Under technical services, capex spend against budget, the actual was 35.79%, and the target was supposed to be 90%. And then there was a target of 100% capital projects completed within targeted dates, and the actual was 68.5%. And then 100% of ministerial directives implemented against the allocated budget. The actual is 65.9%. I'll not get to the rest in the interest of time, but those in the highlight were items that were actually not achieved in the period. If we had to look at product quality, I think this is where we really actually performed very well. I think we all understand that water being a right for starters and being an important product, we also have to make sure that the quality that we deliver to our clients and households is of a high standard. The performance against what we had targeted on the aesthetics, the performance was at 99.6% against the target, a SANS target of 95. Acute chemical health was 100% against a target of 99. Chronic chemical health, it was 99.6 against a target of 97%. Acute microbiological health was 99.7% against a target of 95. Operational 99.3 compared to a target of 95. All these targets were exceeded, and our blue drop status was sitting at about 90%. Under maintenance, as you know, as much as we supply a product of water, we utilize a lot of capital machinery and equipment and plants to make sure that we process this water. Thus, maintenance of that infrastructure is always very important to make sure that they continue to be resilient and deliver in terms of what we expect as the objectives. The maintenance strategy was enhanced, as well as the maintenance plan was implemented to ensure that high plant availability exists and we minimize water supply interruption. Staff turnover was stabilized within the department at all levels that affected primary planning and implementation of the maintenance plan. However, expenditure in the maintenance section was still low compared to the annual target. At the target was 3.5. We achieved 3.11%. The total value in maintenance was 24 million and 30. Next is just to show the unaccounted water losses during the financial year, which were sitting at 2%, 2.02%. The normal target for this industry on water losses is normally 5%. And this was an improvement from last year. If you look at the graph, where last year we were sitting at 2.56, and we're sitting now at 2.02. And on availability and plant availability, our plants were available for 96.33% of the time, down by 2.24% from what we had achieved in the previous year. There were 3 interruptions on wastewater disposal exceeding 24 hours that were experienced during the financial year. there is a target of a minimum of 3 per year, but you know, if you get to then percentages, you then find yourself, you know, being a bit low. In economic empowerment, so as an organization that strives to be a good citizen of the country or the province, Mhlathuze is very much committed to empowering emerging contractors, and during the year, 2 projects of values greater than 50 million were under construction and are still ongoing. But if we then just have to just highlight, it's actually the TGS upgrade as well as the Nsezi upgrade. The project value for those were 119 million rands for the TGS upgrade and 288,321 for the Nsezi upgrade. The participation, and this is empowerment participation on the 2 projects, at 400 million was 123 million rands, which then showed a participation percentage of about 30.5% if you had to take the average. And obviously we then also highlighted what had been spent to date. I think if you see the TGS upgrade, about 2 million rands had been spent to empowerment initiatives or participation, and on the Nsezi upgrade about 56 million had actually been spent as of June 2023. We are also very much passionate about community and youth development within the area of operation, and CSI projects are also important to ensure that we uplift our communities and look at a very strong developmental approach. We have listed there on the table the few CSI projects that we actually did. There was a Zamani Disabled People's Organization where we donated a bus to a non-profit organization for people living with the disability. There was in the area of Inkosumtiane, the event was in support of an initiative by Amakosi within Mhlathuze operation. They were assisted with the hiring of a tent and 2 VIP toilets as well as catering. We're talking an expenditure of about 130,000 rands. And then Oxilwane Primary School assistance with sports kits of netball and soccer to develop skills and talents for the children in the school. We spent about 7,000 rands there. I'm not gonna talk to all of them, but it's just to highlight that we are actually very much passionate about community outreach. On the environment side, there were 3 unplanned incidences, and these events did affect the organization's operation. The environmental incidents include property damage, water contamination, effluent and chemical spillages. There were also near-miss events that could have resulted in any of these happening. Incident management systems with protocols are in place to ensure that proper and timeless response to all incidents is observed. Where we look into our people who actually are the drivers of performance and obviously delivery of these critical products that we actually supply. The workforce profile of Mhlathuze as at the 30th of June 2023 was 238 employees. We had a staff retention of about 7.56% against a target of 8%, but if you look at a 5-year average, it's been rolling at about 6.54%, so quite an improvement against the average, but we're still not where we want to be in terms of the target. The average percentage of staff costs against overall operating expenditure over the past 5 years was about 28.52%, The actual this time around was 32.66 percent, and this was largely due to the increased staff costs, which against a reduced spend on the operating expenditures. I think we do have a pie chart there that shows our gender profile, and we are proud to show that we are very much close to a 50-50 split on the gender profile. I think we only have 47% female and 53% male. And then on the race profile, I think you will notice that we had about 94% African, we had 1% colored, we had 2% Indian, and we had 3% white. How do we enable this talent that we actually utilize to achieve our objectives? Through skills development. And a total of 5.9 million rands was spent on skills development in 2022-2023. We also had a graduate development program that took 5 graduate trainees that are currently participating in the program to register with the Engineering Council of South Africa. Bursary programs, we also do issue bursaries just to continue developing the skills of the workforce. The value extended on bursaries for the period was 281,099. If we had to look at the audit report itself, as I had stated initially, I think in the performance, where we then showed that in 21-22 we had a qualified audit opinion. We then in 2023 improved that audit opinion into an unqualified with findings. I think just the correction there, it was unqualified with findings, and I think the color should be yellow, Chair, and not green. So I think we then had one material irregularity that we've been carrying. I think it had come through from the 21-22 financial year. We are actually looking at resolving those material irregularities. We did, as management, respond to the queries, and we did actually do actions to then deal with some of the issues that were raised by the Auditor General, and this was through the adoption and implementation of recommendations from the forensic investigation reports onto some of the matters that were found to have had non-compliances. In 31 May 2022, investigation reports were commissioned by the board, or the investigation reports commissioned by the board were delivered in 30th and 31st May of 2022. This resulted in 4 new suspensions and instructions to undertake appropriate steps. The 4 is in addition to the 3 that were previously actually mentioned in the previous reports. On disciplinary proceedings that were conducted, there were premature resignations of about 4 and 2 dismissals, and 1 was found not guilty. And then a series of civil and criminal cases have been opened against former officials and service providers, and these matters are in different stages in terms of court proceedings and asset forfeiture. If I have to touch on the financial overview, as Uche had mentioned, that I've got 3 caps today, and Chair, I will be requesting a salary increase since I can multitask. I've proven that I'm a multitasker. When we touch on financial performance, just at a high level, I think Uche had requested that I probably then, I'll get into the numbers. My apologies. I think the screen is not very clear. I'm not sure if you can see, but if maybe someone can switch off these lights, I'll touch on the numbers so long. Our gross profit percentage. Our target for 2023 was 60%. In 2022, we had achieved 65%. The actual was 60.83. So we did improve on what we had actually targeted on the gross profit percentage. I'll get to the detail where we can just look at the graphs. Debtors collection days also improved. We had a target of 45 days. In the previous financial year, we had 41 days. And actual was 38.86 days, so we collected quicker. The net profit margin on primary activities was, we had a target of 15%. Last year it was 24.92%. We then had an actual of 23.12%. The current ratio was, the target was 2.5. We actually, and last year we had 2.39, and the actual was 3.05, which then shows also a positive improvement. And then obviously as acid test ratio, the target was 3. We were on 2.92. Last year we were on 2.32. So there is an improvement towards the target, as much as we didn't get to the target. Debt to equity ratio, our target was 0.23. Last year we were sitting on 0.05, and the actual was 0.04. I'm assuming that we were planning on actually maybe acquiring some debt, which we ended up not acquiring in the year. That's the target of 0.23 and ending up with 0.04. This just means that we actually owe less than what we actually had targeted. Return on assets, the target was 6. We sitting at a return on assets of 12.64 against last year of 10.42. So that's quite an improvement. Asset turnover ratio was, the target was 0.45. Last year we were on 0.49. This year we were on 0.53. Interest turnover ratio, 10.32 was the target. Last year was 25.23. We're sitting with 27.82, so it's quite an improvement. And then we had an EBIT margin, that's the earnings before interest and tax margin. The target was 8.64. In 2022 we achieved 30.39. There was a reduction from prior year of 23.99%, but still higher than the target of 8.64%. And then we on just the high level now, the financial indicators, we had an increase on our volumes of about 12% to 124 million kiloliters. Our revenue, sale of goods and services, for the year 2023 was 749 million rands against a prior year of 643 million rands. This equated to about 17% increase in our sales. I'll get to the details when I touch on the graphs. There is a little bit of an error there on our gross profit. If you look at 2022, it says 41, but actually it's supposed to be 444 million, which then gives you a 2% increase, actually not the 977%, but other income did increase from 27 million last year to 55 million in the current financial year, which equated to 102%. Our total expenditure increased by 15% in total, from 281 million to 323 million rands. And then our total operating surplus, which Chairperson did highlight on it, was 174,912 against last year of 155 million rands. This equated to a 12% growth in profitability for the organization. And I think before I get into the detail is just to still cement what the chair had actually mentioned, that the reconfiguration was never about one entity having problems. It was a matter of trying to achieve a 1 + 1 = 3, where we then are a provincial water board that can actually access all areas of the province. So the reconfiguration and the merger of the two water boards both performed and had growth in their revenues. So there's not one that was rescuing the other. I think it was just a vision of having a combined water board. Yeah, I did say I will touch on the graphical in terms of the gross profit percentage. I did mention that our June 23 was 61% against the budget of 60%. Still a reduction from last year of about 4%. And yeah, we've maintained a gross profit percentage of about 50% since 2018-2019, which still show that we are actually able to maintain our cost of production and still be able to charge a reasonable tariff to our customers. Our net profit margin, I did speak about the fact that in June 2023 it was 23%, slight decline from last year of 2%, and but it's quite an increase from what we targeted. So we were targeting 15%. We then actually achieved 23%. And then the surplus, the 174 million, was an increase from the last year of 156, but a very big jump from the target that we had set ourselves. The budget was sitting at 113 million. We then achieved the 174.9 million rands. As I say, there were some cost savings, but also there were some underspending on certain line items. But what is positive is that you can see a steady growth in Mhlathuze Water's surplus over the years. On the volume analysis, I did touch on the volumes. The bulk water sales increased in the current financial year compared to the previous year, but this was due to customers using more purified water than what was budgeted for. But then there was one of the key customers as well that went through a longer shutdown last year. They increased their production and usage of purified water. Whilst on the other side, we had actual volumes for the period ended 30 June were 57.3 megaliters from a budget of 64.4 megaliters, and there was an under sale of about 7.1 megaliters. This was due to the customers using less raw water. So the first one was an increase, but it was purified water, and then there's actually reductions on the raw and clarified water than what was actually budgeted for. The main reason there is we had increased rainfall that would have filled other water sources for our customers. So obviously then they didn't need as much raw water as they would, so there was less abstraction and then budgeted for. And then on the assets and liability management, I have touched on the current ratio. I'll just jump and move to the next one. I think I did speak to the debt to equity ratio, and I did actually explain where the 0.04 and where the debt. So you will notice that on the graph, if you look at the blues down to the one orange, that we've been repaying our borrowings, and that's the reason why there's a drop in that debt to equity, which means that we were actually repaying our loan. Colleagues, I'll then touch on the planned infrastructure project. So I think Chair, when he was speaking, he did touch on the fact that, you know, we unfortunately the annual report relates to information that goes in the past. But I think when we have important stakeholders here coming to actually listen to this, they also just want to have a glimpse of what is in the future for this area with the consolidated entity. So we then prepared something that just shows as now a consolidated organization what type of you know, group, like numbers that we now looking at. So if I just have to highlight the capex spend for just the 2024 financial year, it's 2.9 billion rand. So you would have noticed that we had about 400 million of capex with just Mhlathuze, but the consolidated entity is chasing a target of 2.9 billion worth of capital expenditure projects in the current financial year. That is now left with 4 months, but we'll get there. So the 5-year capital expenditure budget, and this is now to just look at our 2024 to 2029 tariff forecast. We're looking at a total of 19.1 billion rands and 20.1 billion rands if you have to include the movable capex, but 19.1 is actually projects, and the other billion will be just your movable projects. This amount is split into one, we've got augmentation projects of about 7.1 billion. We've got developmental projects. Those are projects that we do for areas where people have never had tap water or water at all, at 6.1 billion rands. We've got expansion, where we have to expand some of our waterworks and some of our plants at 1.2 billion rands. And then we have rehabilitation, because we have to maintain our infrastructure, at about 3.1 billion rands. And then we have upgrades of about 1.5 billion rands, thus making up the 19.1 billion rands. Of that, if I have to just touch on some of the key infrastructure projects, and as I said, we're looking at the future. There is Lower uMngeni. This mainly affects eThekwini and Ugu. I know it doesn't affect here, but obviously for information of what's happening within the province. The project cost, the estimated project cost is 6.1 billion rands. And obviously for the 24 to 29, we're looking at the fact that we would have spent about 5.4 billion of that 6.1 billion. Then there's the Upper uMngeni, or we call it uMngeni Water Project. I'll touch on it a little bit because it's quite it's a catalytic project for us in terms of how many households it's gonna impact and affect. And that is budgeted at about 8.8 billion rands, and this is our element of the project. I think the overall project is about 28 billion rands, but our element is 8.8 billion of that. uMshwathi phase 4 in southern Ndwedwe, this affects Ilembe district municipality. It's about 832 million rands. As Mpophomeni wastewater works in uMngeni-uThukela at 535 million rands. Vulindlela pump station and reservoir in uMngeni-uThukela Mhlathuze area as well. It's about 500 million rands. There's a Stephen Dlamini bulk water supply scheme, estimated about 795 million rands. Mhlabatshane bulk water supply scheme phase 2. This affects Ugu at 851 million rands. There's Greater Mpofana bulk water supply scheme phase 1, affecting uMngeni-uThukela at 1 billion rands. Durban Heights filter upgrade at 500 million rands. Twabeni of channel storage dam affecting Ugu district at 1.9 billion. a rehabilitation of aqueduct 3 and 4 at R500 million. Please forgive me with the small it's the small writings, but it's Maphumulo phase 3 in Ilembe at 300 million, Umshwati Ilembe at 300 million, Impendle at 648 million rands. We have Howick West Reservoir at about 77 million. There's the Davul Sludge Handling Facility and the Davul Wastewater combination of about 1.2 billion rands. And then if we have to look at this area, how it is affected, we've got the Nsezi plant augmentation, and this is now an independent 170 megaliters per day plant. Contract 1 and 3, and this is now gonna be affecting uMngeni-uThukela and the city of Mhlathuze. The project cost is 496 million rands. We're planning to spend over the 5-year the construction of uThukela Hudethrow transfer scheme. The completion of that scheme, it does also impact city of Mhlathuze and uMngeni-uThukela. The cost is about 386 million 100. And then obviously we are planning to spend about 220 million in the 5-year corporate plan. So I said I will touch a little bit on the Mkomazi project, just to give a highlight of the impact. So the project will transfer water from Mkomazi River to augment the uMngeni water supply system, which supplies domestic water to more than 5 million people and industries in KZN. uMngeni system is already experiencing a deficit and therefore needs to be augmented for increased water security in the uMngeni system in order to meet both the current and future demands. The Minister of Water and Sanitation appointed TCTA, which is Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority, to fund and implement the raw water component of the Mkomazi project. And then the minister then appointed uMngeni-uThukela Water to fund and implement the potable water component of that Mkomazi project. As I said, the raw water component, I'm not gonna get to the details. Thank you. But it's an 81-meter high dam at Smithfield on the Mkomazi River, and a 33-meter long and 3.5 diameter raw water tunnel from the dam at Smithfield up to Mhlathuze River Valley. And then it's going to be a 5.1 kilometer long and 2.6 meter diameter gravity bulk raw water pipeline that will connect raw water tunnel to the Bainsfield water treatment works. And then on the potable water component, then the Bainsfield water treatment works is their initial capacity is 500 megaliters per day. This is gonna be upgradable to about 625 megaliters per day. And then a 21.3 kilometer and a 2.7 meter diameter gravity potable water pipeline from that Bainsfield waterworks to Umla's Road. A potential of 2.6 megawatt hydropower plant is also being envisaged in that particular plant. So we'll try and look at also having alternative energy to supply that project. Program Director, I'll stop here and then take questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ndonga, for that insightful presentation. Maybe can I acknowledge the presence of one of our board members that the chair had announced was running late. Mr. Ndazile Mhlongo, if I could just request that you rise. We did likewise with your fellow board members so our stakeholders can be better acquainted with yourself. Thank you. Thank you, Ndonga, for the presentation. We will now move to the questions and comments section. Can I make a plea in particular to my media colleagues? I know some of them, particularly television, has requested one-on-one interviews to say, I will grant you an opportunity outside of this gathering to actually pose your questions, as those might be specific to issues that were not discussed here, or even if they are, by your very nature, you are here to mine information, so we would not want to steal the platform from our stakeholders. So can we hold our questions as media colleagues and just open the platform to our stakeholders? There is a request from the media and our camera crew that if you could just stand up as you ask the question, also so that the board can see you and just to present us with better visual. So if you could just identify yourself and the organization you represent as you ask the question and make the comment. I believe there are roaming mics around. If the team could assist with those, yes, I see one in the middle. There's a hand at table number 3 on my right. I note that hand. Colleagues in the middle of the room, brand and marketing or CSMU, if there are other hands that I can't see, just note them as well. Thanks.
Okay, morning everyone. My name is uMngeni-uThukela from Mondi Richards Bay. So I'm the head of the mill, specifically focusing on the energy and utility section, so hence that's why I'm here. So I think maybe 2 questions from a Mondi perspective. So looking at the financial performance of Mhlathuze and the relations that we do have with the existing executive team. So this Mhlathuze team has really been good. I think the performance sort of speaks for itself from a business point of view with really good business numbers. And I think technically, if you look at just the availability of the operations plant, so availability did decrease from 98% to 96% in 2023, but overall, really impressed with the business itself. So I think to the board, a question just from a Mondi perspective is to ask, how are we going to ensure that we maintain this current business performance from a business perspective, so good financials, and then I think from an operations point of view, which is really key for a business such as Mondi, who's quite entrenched in the Richards Bay district. So how are we going to ensure good business performance from a Mhlathuze perspective? And I think operationally, how are we going to improve just the operation side? So this uptime that we're seeing that is really good, how are we going to push that and ensure that it moves from 96% to 99% and maybe even 100%?
Thank you for the question, Nkululeko. Are there any other hands? Oh, you've got one more question. No, you can shoot.
Oh, I could ask.
Right.
Okay, just maybe still, I see Pokela is here, and I should have really asked him, but maybe just for the greater uMngeni-uThukela team, we did mention that there was 3 disturbances that affected the waste side of the business, so specifically the effluent to sea line, if I can specifically put it that way. So we are concerned from a Mondi business perspective about the integrity of that line. Is there any specific capex injections that we'll be doing in the next 5 years? So I did hear the Nsezi upgrade. I did hear quite a few, but I think I missed that one specifically to that effluent line, effluent to sea.
All right, thank you. Maybe let's answer Nkululeko's questions for now, and potentially we might get more hands if we move along. If we don't, it's not a crime. It only testifies to how quite clearly the presentations went.
No, thank you, Nkululeko, for your questions and maybe concerns. I think the first one, where you were saying how to ensure that performance is maintained. I think when the reconfiguration started, one of the big strategies of the then board was that customers must not feel the transition. So one of the big drivers of making sure that you don't feel the transition is when you are then redesigning the new business to ensure that service levels and human resources and any other support does not change. So on the new structure, we then have regional clusters that we've actually then kept. And the Richards Bay is now the northern region. So there's a northern region, there's the central, I think there's, I've forgotten the other ones, but there's about 4 regions. And with those regions, we have not then gone and said we are getting rid of staff or we are putting new team members. So whoever was operating in those particular areas, they continue to then provide the good service. And we do appreciate the compliments that you've given to the team in terms of what they deliver. I think on the concerns on the spillage line, probably Mr. Maponya will maybe allow you to then maybe just expand. It's good that you gave us a hint who's supposed to answer, so he will then maybe touch as the General Manager Operations. There's a mic.
If I can have a mic. Thank you, Acting CE. Thanks for the question from Nkululeko. I think you had 2 questions that I need to answer. Let's answer the first one in terms of the 3 disturbances. Those ones happen on the sea line mostly, which is the line that my colleague here sitting next to me we service, which is takes gypsum from Fosco to the sea. So it was not on the A line. Having said that, specific on those incidents, currently we have swapped from C line, and we are now operating with the old B line. And the plan is to then rehabilitate the C line. So there is a CAPEX specific for that. On the maintenance issue, where you've mentioned that we are now sitting at 96, you would like us to go to 100%. I think you would know that 100% is almost impossible because you need to allow time to do maintenance. So 96 is already world class, but we need to get it back to 98. We do have built-in redundancy. Some of the work that we are now doing is to ensure that our built-in redundancy functions at 100% and then allows the team to then do maintenance. And that will then push us from 96 to 98%. Thanks. CE.
Thank you very much.
I think I must add to Nkululeko because I think one other element of your question really seeks to say, is there going to be stability in the region? So I think as a board, the approach is to ensure that the region is stable. It has a solid leadership. Hence, I think the configuration that allows the Richards Bay to continue to perform, and with I think an availability of necessary funds if required. I think one can just make that as a bold statement. I think on a lighter note, your 96%, 100%, so I'm laughing because when we were at school, we were passing with 50%. Now people got 96, 100. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the clarities to the questions. I don't see any additional hands. In the off chance, I'll have to do like an auctioneer and say going once, twice, and gone. But if there are any other hands that come up, there will be an opportunity outside. Can I now invite onto the podium the Deputy Chairperson of the Board of uMngeni-uThukela, Ms. Nothando Mhlathuze, to give us a vote of thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Program Director. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to stand on the established protocol. As I have been introduced, my name is Mhlathuze. I am the Deputy Chair of the Board. Okay, I seem to be having some technical problems. Thank you. It is my pleasure to be afforded an opportunity to have the proverbial last word today. Firstly, ngicela ukubonga our Chairperson of the Board, Advocate uMngeni, the Senior Counsel, for his leadership and enlightening words he shared. I always joke that I've only been his deputy for 4 months, but I'm already done with the 6 chapters of the book that I'll release at the end of the term. Being the deputy of the advocate is definitely an interesting job. So we appreciate you, uMngeni, and we are comfortable and we are confident that the strategic vision of the board will be successfully executed. Can we clap hands for the chairperson? Thank you. I would also like to acknowledge with extreme gratefulness the presence of our industrial and municipal stakeholders. I'm going to mention a few. We've already heard from the gentleman from Mondi. We have your NSW Consulting. We have your Tronox, your Impact, your ZCCI, Fosco, Hulamin, Icon Construction, and I did say to mention a few. Over and above that, or whoever I haven't mentioned, we truly appreciate your presence, the industrial and municipal stakeholders. Your overwhelming response to our invitation is an indication of the direct interest you hold in the strategic operations of uMngeni-uThukela. As the board, management, and staff of the newly established UUW, we remain indebted to you for your continued stewardship and support. Our very existence hinges in our ability to continually provide you with superior bulk water and wastewater services. And maybe just to bring it back home in layman's term, it is really to echo the sentiments that have been expressed by the colleagues that have spoken here, that where you previously had one resource from Mhlathuze Water to service your needs as customers, you now have 4 as uMngeni-uThukela Water. So the growth has happened exponentially, and it is all to ensure that bulk water supply, potable water, clarified water, water in all stages of treatment will be supplied to all our customers and to KZN as a whole. So it is really to emphasize that in Zulu we say, akonakele lutho, kunalokho izinto ihamba kahle kakhulu. Moving on, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of representatives of organized labor at uMngeni-uThukela. Your presence here today means that all employees of uMngeni-uThukela Water, particularly at shop floor levels, they are represented and they have a voice in the strategic direction that the water utility is taking. I also note the presence of executive and middle management from uMngeni-uThukela among the audience, and we do hope that you'll continue to keep open lines of communication with organized labor. We also acknowledge the presence of the media today. We trust that the good story that has been conveyed by the board and management here today will find prominent front page display in the various newspapers and electronic platforms you represent. We really do appeal to you, our media colleagues. Lastly, Program Director, please do allow me to thank my fellow board members. We look forward to continually working with industrial stakeholders, further solidify our working relationship, and in this regard, we are actually fortunate that one of the colleagues, uMngeni-uThukela, is the president of the Zululand Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So this should certainly make our plans of meeting stakeholder expectations from both government and business much more effortless. Chairperson, with your permission, let me also appreciate and commend the outgone board and the then management of Mhlathuze Water. Today, a story of tenacity was told. You know, we reported surplus, we reported unqualified, a going concern entity was handed over, and it would be a mistake if we'd not commend and note and appreciate the effort that was put in by these colleagues. So can we please clap hands for the outgone board and the then management. We have already picked from the presentation that it was not business as usual. So we really do note the good work that they did put in. And lastly, there is a quote by Harold Rosenberg. He says, "The people of an era must either carry the burden of change assigned to their time or die under its weight in the wilderness." We commend you, the then management, that you did not die in the wilderness. You did not buckle under the weight. So as the new board, we get to stand on those efforts. We commend you on that. And then also colleagues, yes, you can actually clap hands again. Thank you, thank you. And Sengizohlala phansi, we appreciate the program director Mashimane. Thank you, sir. And Undonga for being the resource we never knew we needed as the board. From being the CFO, COO, acting CE, he did say he's everything. So Ndonga, we commend you on that. Ukhulume waze wakhwehlela ngakudabukela ngihleli phansi. So we thank you for carrying the weight of today's event. And we thank everyone, the organizing team, for this stellar event. And we thank everyone for coming through. Colleagues, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
I am closing the program. The vote of thanks has been said. There's no more to be said, except ukuthi ivale mfana. So that's what I'm doing. Ngiyayivala. Our guests, as you leave, I've been told by my colleagues at the back that there's a token of appreciation. If I could request the board chair and the acting CE and his many hats to just be available for media interviews outside. Thank you very much once again.